Hello, everyone.
Hello, hello.
Uh, if you want to specialize in core web vitals, especially on the SEO side, I have a really wonderful guest with excellent experience in this discipline today. And welcome, Estela. How are you?
Hello, Adem. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here today. This is my first time speaking publicly in English, so I'm really happy and really excited today.
Realmente, quiero continuar en español.
No problema.
No problem. Welcome again. So it's a good experience for us to make this episode in English, probably. Yeah, if you want, we can continue also in Spanish. So.
Kind of mix.
No, don't trust me. Don't trust me.
No problem, no problem.
Yeah. So, how is the weather in Barcelona?
Really hot this year, but probably it's really hot everywhere, so probably
Yeah,
not that
I
bad.
think so.
But we will survive, I hope.
Yeah, I'm surviving also in Istanbul. It's kind of sunny also, but I'm in the office now, and there's an air conditioner here. It saved me.
I'm jealous.
I'm getting jealous. All right. So, who is Estela Franco?
Okay, so I am Estela Franco. I am a web performance specialist at Schneider Electric. I am from the sunny and really hot Barcelona, and I have 10 years of experience in SEO. Most of the time, I've worked in-house in different types of business like leisure, travel, news, or energy. But the last 5 years, I've been more focused on the technical SEO and web performance. And apart from that, I am also a co-founder of the Mujeres en SEO community, which is a community for Spanish-speaking women in SEO, and also part of the Web Perf Impactors team, which is a podcast in Spanish about web performance.
Perfectly. I'm kind of jealous for that, mujeres en SEO. I'm not a woman, and also I don't speak Spanish, so yeah, I'm loser.
You don't have any
But I'm
point to be
jealous.
able to go that.
Right, perfect.
But I also want to share with you different facts about me, not related to work. And I love hiking and nature, and I live in the countryside, so it's really easy to me to go hiking. The bad news is that I hate driving, and as you can imagine, living in the countryside, I need the car to go everywhere. So, well, it couldn't be everything perfect, right? I am also gym and healthy cooking passionate. And whenever I can, I love traveling. And what I love the most is traveling to different islands. And you can see here different pictures of me enjoying this kind of things of my personal life.
Is there any interesting islands in the close to the Barcelona?
Where we have the Balearic Islands, Mallorca, Menorca, Ibiza, and Formentera. I've been
Ibiza, yeah.
in three of them. I've never been to Formentera yet, but yeah,
Ah.
I know the other three. Yeah.
Perfect. You are
But,
lucky than me. I haven't been another island, so.
Whenever you want, we have good islands here.
I will do it.
But well, we are here to talk about different things, which is about SEO and core web vitals. So if you want, we can go through the different slides I've prepared to share with the audience today to talk about the SEO, the core web vitals, and the myths and truths behind this topic. Okay, so first of all, what are the core web vitals and why do they matter for SEO? And I'm sure all of you remember a couple of years ago when Google announced the core web vitals, and they also announced an upcoming search ranking update to incorporate these metrics, and all the industry went a little bit crazy about that because an update with metrics and so on. So what are the core web vitals? It is an initiative from Google to provide unified guidance for quality signals that are essential to provide a great user experience. And there are three metrics to achieve this, which are the LCP, the FID, and the CLS. We won't go through the different metrics because that's not the point today. But how they impact SEO. So Google told us that they were part of the search signals for page experience, this upcoming update that they announced. And this update on June 2021, Google rolled out this update for mobile devices. The core web vitals are part of this update among with other signals such as mobile friendly, using HTTPS, and non-using intrusive interstitials. And also this year, on February, they rolled out the update for desktop devices. In this case, as you can imagine, the mobile friendly is not a signal for this update, okay? But since then, we've heard lots and lots of myths about the impact related to core web vitals. And let's cover different myths that I've heard during this year and the truths behind the myths. The first one, if we don't pass the core web vitals assessment, Google will penalize our website. So this is related to penalties. And before going to the truths behind the myth, I want to also talk about the myth number 2. The core web vitals are the most important ranking factor because this is related to ranking impact. And the truth behind both myths are quite the same, okay? So we've seen that the core web vitals are a signal, part of the page experience update they rolled out last year and this year, but we don't know the real impact, right? We don't know if that's the most important ranking factor or if something related to penalties will apply. And these kind of questions, people tend to ask a lot to John Mueller during the office hours streamings. And what does John Mueller say about that? So what he says is that websites would not see a big visible change related to core web vitals, even if a website goes from the reasonable bucket to the poor bucket from one day to the next. We would not expect to see a giant change in the search results. Okay, and he also says that when the search result page has lots of similar results, the content of the results is very similar, then using the page experience helps a little bit to understand which results are fast and which results are not as reasonable pages to show to the users, okay? And I also want to share a tweet from Gary Alice, also from the Google Search Relation team. And he says that putting effort, putting work in core web vitals doesn't mean that the site won't lose any rankings over time. Okay, with an example that I love, I also washed my car hundreds of times and it still left me standing on the highway. Okay, so if you're suffering with rankings, probably core web vitals is not the most important thing you should look at. Okay, and also another tweet from John Mueller, because we don't really know the impact, right? But he kind of explain the possible impact. We can see some kind of boost when we go from the poor bucket to the good bucket. Since we are in the needs improvement bucket, it seems we can see some kind of boost. But please don't expect a boost to the light speed, okay? Because what we've seen with the different things we've covered related to this myth, the page experience ranking factor is helpful when multiple sites have similar answers. The core web vitals aren't responsible for huge ranking changes. In fact, they might influence small ranking changes. And passing the core web vitals assessment doesn't guarantee that you won't lose any ranking. That's not the most important ranking, okay? So myths number 1 and myths number 1 and 2 are false, okay? So we can move on to the next one. We need good figures on Lighthouse to improve our SEO results. This is about focusing only on lab data. To better understand this, we need first to understand the difference between lab data and field data and what kind of data we should use, okay? So the lab data is the data that we collect loading a web page in a controlled environment, setting specific network and devices conditions. This is also known as synthetic monitoring data, and Google offers tools to monitor that, such as Lighthouse, and you can also get this kind of data from PageSpeed Insights, which is using Lighthouse behind the scenes, but there's plenty of options on the market, okay, such as Web Page Test, Debug Beer, Treo, SpeedCurve for lab data. But then what's the field data? The field data is data coming from real users visiting your web page, okay, with their actual devices, with their actual network conditions and geographic location. This is also known as real user monitoring data, or RAM data for short. And Google offers the CRUX data, okay? We will cover this in the following slides. And the CRUX data is also available through the PageSpeed Insights tool, but there's plenty of options in the market to monitor the field data, such as SpeedCurve, Dynatrace, New Relic, Datadog, and Pulse, and so on, okay? And we've seen that Google is using the Core Web Vitals data to use in the page experience ranking factor, but what kind of data is using Google? In fact, they are using CRUX data. Okay, so it's not all the lab data, or sorry, not all the field data available everywhere, but just the data from the CRUX, the Chrome user report, the Chrome user experience report. Okay, so what's the CRUX? Chrome user experience report. The CRUX is a public data set from Google, which is collecting real user experience data on millions of websites from Chrome users, but not all the Chrome users, because it's about Chrome users that have opted into syncing their browsing history and have not set up a sync passphrase, and they have usage statistics reporting enabled, and of course, they use a supported platform. And that point is important because there are some exceptions. Google isn't collecting data from Chrome on iOS or native Android apps using WebView, and other Chromium browsers, for instance, Edge, okay? And I said it's a public data set, so we can access the data which is collected through this report, and we can access it in different ways. For instance, we have CRUX on BigQuery and CRUX Data Studio Dashboard, which offers monthly data aggregated by domains, okay, by origins, which is called this way on the dataset. But you can also use the CRUX API or PageSpeed Insights or PageSpeed Insights API, and this way you can have daily data which is based on aggregated data of the last 28 days. In this case, you can get data from the domain or a specific page if it has enough traffic. Okay, that's another point to discuss. And on Google Search Console, you will have 28 days average data, and it's collected in a different way. It's aggregated in a different way. We will see this here. Because the monthly data, Google is collecting data, and it releases the data the second Tuesday of every month. Okay, and when we get data in a daily basis, so Google is updating every single day the data, but it's providing data aggregated for the last 28 days. Okay, for instance, in PageSpeed Insights, as we saw in the previous slide. And on Google Search Console, you will see that Google is aggregating the pages in different groups, and maybe it seems that it doesn't make sense, because maybe you can see a group with pages that from different categories or different type of pages, but in fact, Google is aggregating this data with URLs that provide similar experiences. Okay, so they are collected, these pages that offer the same kind of user experience related to Core Web Vitals. So the truth is that we really need lab data, because even if Google is using field data, we've seen that CRUX data is offering aggregated data and average data for an entire month or the last 28 days. So it's really hard when working on Core Web Vitals. When you fix something, you need to wait several weeks until you see the result in the field. Okay, so we need lab data to ensure that we can debug, we can identify, and once we fix something, we can validate that the fix really improved the Core Web Vitals, and then we expect the results to be in the field. But what's most important is that lab data should be tested, in an environment, the most similar environment to our users, because it doesn't make sense if you only look at lab data for desktop devices with cable connections and your real users are using slow devices with a slow connection. So even if you see some improvement in the lab, probably you won't see the improvement in the field. Okay, so we need to have this kind of information in mind to make sure that you collect lab data in the most real environment you can test. Okay, so once we check everything in the lab and we expect results, then we can wait to see the results in the field. In short, we work in the lab to see the results in the field. But focusing on your lab data,
maybe we can add something here, Estela. Like,
okay.
I still see some presentations or reports from some SEO agencies, and they are still sharing lab data performances, like from the websites, and they are showing it to clients. So I think still SEOs also, or maybe another marketers, or maybe software developers, they are still thinking, as you said, lab data is more important. But I think, like as you said, lab data is just, we need to try something, and then we can need to see like our field data. We need to measure the first field data. And also I can add something here because of the Google like page speed insight. They changed and they update design and they put the field data first now. And in the previous days, they were showing the lab data first and the page speed insight score, And yeah, because of that, still some people and also SEOs still thinking that lab data is more important, and they don't know what's the difference between lab data and field data. So it's really important slides for
that's
everyone.
true. In fact, during since I started working on SEO, we've been working with lab data because that was the most easy way to get data, and yeah, it's been lots of years that PageSpeed Insights only collected lab data. So yes, it's complicated to make maybe switch from that kind of thinkings of beliefs to understand that we need to work on lab. Okay, let's work in the lab, but the most important thing is that we need to see the results in the field.
Of course, yeah. And there's a question from Emre. And do we need to measure a web page perform via 3G or lower connections? Which connection is the most important for us?
The most important connection is the connection that your users are using. And in fact, in the Crux report, you can get this data. You can get the percentage of users that are the Chrome users that are using 2G, 3G, 4G. Okay, so you are able to detect if you should test with a slower connection or with a fast connection. Because if all your users are using 4G, we shouldn't test with 3G. Maybe we can test to ensure that, because the slower the connection, the more problems you will detect, because it's a slower. So it depends. Maybe to debug and to go deeper in different issues that maybe we have is a good practice, but we need to ensure that we test to improve the results for our real users. So I would focus on the real connection from our users, and Crux is a good way to look at that and to understand what are the different conditions that we need to set in the lab.
So again, we need to say field data, like we need to focus on more client side. So just measure what your users are using. So another comment from the Brenda, actually, I really agree with that. Some pages has really less traffic, and because of that, we are not getting to field data. So
that's it.
At that time, we need to use lab data. So thank you, Brenda, for this comment.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because not all, even in big websites, not all the pages are getting enough traffic to be included on the Crux, because Google is only including those pages, those popular pages, to be included there, and we don't know exactly what that means. But yes, enough traffic. Okay, so yes, there are lots of not only pages, but also there's a lot of small websites which also don't have any data from the field. So yes, in these cases, you can measure with the lab and try to make the best for your users. We need to do the best with the different data we have.
In case not enough sample, we need to use lab data also. Okay, Thank you, Estela, for this answer.
Thank you. Okay, so with all these things we've seen, we know that focusing only on lab data without any other kind of information in general is false, okay? So let's move on to the next one. Serve a pre-rendered version of the website to Googlebot, and we will pass the Core Web Vitals assessment. And this is about focusing only on Googlebot. And I'm pretty sure this belief is because of SEO. Because when we, for instance, are struggling with indexing, when we work with different JavaScript generated content, we can use a technique which is called dynamic rendering, which is serving Googlebot a different version of the website, in this case, a pre-rendered version of the website, and you can serve the users the client-side rendering version of the page. This way, we will ensure that Googlebot is able to see the content, the JavaScript-generated content, and we will solve the indexing issues. This is a workaround, okay? So this is not a long-term solution, but this is something that we ask the teams to do. So if we, in the past, have been asking the teams to do this kind of stuff, now that we have another issue, which is Core Web Vitals related to SEO, related to Google, it's easy to think that this kind of technique is also available to use to solve this issue. Okay, but what we've seen before is that Google is focusing on Crux data. So Even if you serve a really good version of your website to Googlebot with really good core web vitals values, it won't impact the cracks. Okay, so it won't impact the search signals for page experience. So again, this myth is also false. Okay, let's move on. This is a tricky one. Defer all the Java scripts and we will improve our core web vitals. This is about deferring all the scripts. And to go through this myth, we need to understand what is the critical rendering path. The critical rendering path is the sequence of steps that the browser goes through to convert the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript files into real pixels on the user's screen. So the browser gets the HTML and builds the DOM. It gets the CSS and builds the DOM. We may have different JavaScript files that may modify the DOM or the CSS DOM. Once we have the DOM and the CSS DOM, the browser builds the render tree. And once we have the render tree, it can go through the layout and finally painting the pixels. Okay, and the JavaScript modifying the DOM and the CSS DOM. There's different ways to load a JavaScript file, okay? And we will see how it impacts during the rendering process, the parsing process, sorry. By default, if we have a script without any attribute, the browser gets the HTML file and it parses it, it analyzes it, okay? And when it finds the script, it stops and then it downloads the JavaScript. After that, it executes the JavaScript, and after that, it can continue parsing the rest of the HTML file. So during this process, the browser, the HTML parsing has been blocked. Okay, but there are different attributes that will modify this behavior. If we add an async attribute, then when the browser finds the script tag, it will download it in parallel, but it will keep parsing the HTML file. Okay, so once the script is downloaded, it will execute it. During this time, it will stop the parsing process, and after that, it will continue parsing the HTML. So here you can see that we've reduced the time the HTML parsing process is blocked. Okay, and there's another attribute, which is defer. And in this case, when the browser finds the tag, it will download it in parallel, but it won't stop until it finishes parsing the HTML file, okay? And once the parsing process is finished, then it will execute the script. And if you see this, probably you will think, okay, so this myth is true, because if we defer all the scripts, we will optimize the HTML parsing process. And that's true, but what happens when these scripts are really needed to, for instance, for JavaScript-generated content, or to make visible some content in the website, or, for instance, depending on mobile or device, I don't know. There are different scenarios where these scripts may modify the DOM or the CSS DOM. And let's see this with an example, okay? Because it's quite tricky to understand just this way. In this code, we have 3 paragraphs, okay? And then we have 3 tags that we will fill with JavaScript. Okay, so we have here different scripts with different attributes to modify these tags. In this case, the first script, so the browser goes through this, and then when it finds the first script, it executes it. This script behind the scenes is filling this script, this tag, sorry. Okay, we have this field, and then go through the next one. It has a defer attribute, so in this case, it will stop parsing, it will download it without stopping the parsing process. It goes through the next one. In this case, it doesn't have any attributes, so it will fill, in this case, this tag. And finally, we have another one, which is executing a pop-up, which is blocking the execution, okay? Here we have an async attribute, but in this case, this is the last element of the HTML. So after downloading it, the browser will execute it. The pop-up will block the process, the execution, and until we close the pop-up, the browser won't execute the defer script. As we said, the defer script goes at the end of the rest of the code, okay? So let's see this in action. And this is the expected result, okay? The different content that we filled with JavaScript. And once I refresh the page, just let me, here we can see that, okay? We have the sync content we don't have any deferred content here. We have the pop-up, which is blocking the execution. And then once I accept the pop-up, here we can see the deferred content appear. Okay, so what happens? This content, imagine this content is an image and is the LCP element. So if we defer this content, we won't see the element until all the rest of the scripts are executed. Okay, or the rest of the scripts in the critical rendering path. Okay, so this kind of, it's complicated to understand. This is something even the technical teams, they don't really have this completely clear because, it's, as I said, it's quite tricky, but this helps us to understand that deferring all the scripts without knowing if they are modifying the DOM or the CSS it's not that true, because deferring those that are responsible for JavaScript generated content may cause a degradation in the core web vitals, in the LCP generally, okay? But it may affect also the other ones. But deferring scripts that won't interact with the DOM or the CSOM can be a good practice to improve the core web vitals results, because we are removing all the noise, let's say, that the browser can focus on executing what we really need to render in the page, at least the first viewport, okay? And then once we have everything, then, okay, execute the rest of the things. So it may be a good practice, but again, deferring all the scripts without knowing if they are impacting or not the DOM or the CSS SOM is also false.
Yeah. Sometimes, you know, like some CSS or maybe JavaScript, they can differing sometimes, but it can also affect our cumulative layout shift metrics. So it means that also core web vitals will be affected negatively.
Yes.
And because of that, as you said, like differing everything time, yeah. Not different. And I've seen also like preload, you know, like everything,
preload everything.
Preload everything. Did you see that memes?
Yes, that's also common. Yeah, because it doesn't make sense, because if you are preloading everything, then anything is important. Yeah, but like, yes, it's also a common myth that, yeah, deferring everything and preloading everything is kind of that's the kind of thing that you probably will see in different projects. Yeah. And this is the last myth that I bring today to share with you, which is that if we have good core web vitals, finally we've been working a lot and we have everything in the good bucket, don't touch the code. Okay, so if it works, don't ever touch it again. Okay, this is also a common myth. And what's the truth? The truth is that the core web vitals is a moving target, okay? Because Google may modify the way they calculate the values of the metrics. We've seen this in the past. Last year, Google changed the way they calculate the CLS. So lots of websites saw a difference, a change on that metric, and it was like, okay, we've improved our metric or CLS, we've been working so hard, and it's like, no, Google modified how they calculate that, okay? So maybe sometimes we can see an improvement, but depending on how they modify the metric, maybe we see a degradation, so they are a moving target, okay? But not only that, they can also even change the metrics, okay? And I want to introduce the interaction to next paint metric. I don't know if you are familiar with it, but it's so far, it's an experimental metric, okay? But it's called to replace the first input delay, okay? So probably you will have, you have a good values for FID, because it's a metric that most of the time is good, but probably you don't have a good value for interaction to next paint. So if Google is switching from one to another, probably you won't pass the core web vitals assessment. Okay, so I'm sorry, but even if you don't touch the code again, that's not guarantee to ensure that you are passing the core web vitals assessment.
Yeah, and another case, like, you know, for example, in the CLS 0.1, and it's like a neat improvement. It's so close neat improvement, but maybe that's the average is like 0.09, and everyone is saying, okay, that's enough. So we are passing this metric. But you know, in the background,
yes,
changing, and these samples are changing. And it means that yes, if the samples are changing, it will be maybe negatively, like it will increase the 0.1. So yeah,
yes.
because of
Yeah,
that.
and even maybe it even depends on your server, because for instance, if the CLS is related to an image that is loading and you didn't reserve any space, if the server is lasting more to serve the image, I'm talking now about LCP. I have
Yeah.
so much stuff in my head. Okay, yeah, but you're right. Being in the limit, whatever that happens, may impact, or even, yeah, maybe you have a little logo.
Yeah.
In this case, it may affect. If you have a little logo which is causing a really small CLS, but if it loads really fast, you don't get it because it's loaded fast. But if for whatever reason the logo comes later, then it doesn't have the logo when rendering the page, and then it's
Yeah.
a CLS. Okay, so you see a Swift. So
We can give the
being in the
same
limit is
example
not
for
a good
LCP.
practice. Yeah,
Yeah,
for everything.
I think so. Yeah, for everything.
But yeah, I wouldn't recommend to be in the limit just to make sure that, yeah.
To
And
solve every problem.
devices, yeah, depending on the devices, or I don't know. Google now has a new device. iPhone, for instance, a new iPhone or a new Pixel or whatever. So now a new device with a new screen, and maybe now the Swift is larger because the screen is different. So don't be in the limit. So that was all the myths that I had to share with you today. There's plenty of myths. I'm sure you heard most of them, and also different ones. So I'm really happy to keep discussing on Twitter about the different myths you heard. Don't hesitate to ping me. And that's all from my side.
Thank you so much, Estela. Really, all slides were really so detailed, and also I learned a lot from you today. For example, like a cracks report is there every time updating on the second Tuesday. I never read this part from the web dev or
Yeah.
maybe Chrome user experience
Yes,
report.
I think that's something that not all people know, and it's
Yeah,
second Tuesday.
that's
Well, in fact, last month I don't
perfect
know if they
information.
have. Yeah, they had some kind of issue last month, and it was like one day later. But in general, it's second Tuesday. But that's why we don't have the data on exact date every single month. It's not on 8th of the month or 10 or 12. It depends on the month because it's second Tuesday.
It's perfect, really so detailed and geek information for us today for the Core Web Vitals, and thank you so much. And we have a really good newsletter from the Bootstraps agency, and you can find some informational blog posts from maybe Core Web Vitals as we talked today. And also we are sending some summary of the weekly SEO, and you can find it from this newsletter, and you can subscribe this newsletter. So thank you, everyone. And thank you, Estela, for everything.
Thank you so much.
So you are out of this world, and I can say that. So bye-bye, everyone. See you next episode.